Welcome to the Psychotherapy Central podcast, where we discuss love, attachment, and healing from trauma. A place where you can gain the knowledge, tools, and wisdom to help you build secure, flourishing relationships. I'm your host, clinical psychotherapist and couples therapist, Jennifer Nurick. Welcome to the Psychotherapy Central podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Nurick, and on this episode, we're going to be discussing one of my favorite topics, which is attachment theory. It is so my favorite topic that I've actually written a book on the subject of anxious attachment. And this podcast is on the 5 things that you need to know about attachment. So attachment theory was first an observed phenomena in children by psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And they were looking at the interactions between parents and children when they were separated. So the parent would leave the room and then they would come back in. And they found that children had one of 2 responses. They either found them to be kind of securely attached to the caregiver or insecurely attached. And later on, they found that within that insecure group, there were 3 main kinds of insecure attachment: anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Later researchers found, which is the really interesting bit for us, that these attachment styles continued into adulthood and have quite a big impact on our adult relationships. So remember that attachment is really about our emotional connection with another person. That it is part of our system always asking, how safe is it for me to connect with another person, with this other person, with this person who is supposed to care for me? How likely am I to get my needs met? So the first thing that I'd love you to know about attachment theory is that it is a way of looking at how we get our needs met and how we respond under stress. So it's very relational, okay? It's not a diagnosis. It's not something that you have for the rest of your life. That it is something that often we internalize in our younger years and is malleable. So some of you will breathe a sigh of relief as you hear me say that, I hope. So the second thing I really want you to know is that your attachment style is an adaptation, okay? And this can be really helpful to remember to help create more softness when you find yourself acting from a place, from an adaptive response in ways that you might not really like. Just remembering that it's a natural and normal reaction given your patterning from your childhood. And I like to think of it as relational patterning. So your reaction will always make sense in the context of your history. And remember that we all come into relationships with a history. Not only with our childhood and all of those relationships, but also with our adult experiences of our relationships. And we all come in with a complex and rich history. We come in with lots of different parts, right? I come in with my wounded parts. I come in with my anxious parts, with maybe avoidant parts, with parts that are very used to protesting really loudly and getting their needs met. And then to make that more complicated, my partner comes in with all of his parts, with his angry part and his wounded part and his anxious part and maybe avoidant part, right? And so we come together like into a parts party almost, and we can create kind of the perfect storm. And what might have started out as a wonderful, fulfilling and thriving relationship can be pressing all of our buttons all over the place with each other and can feel like a huge storm that we're in the middle of. The third thing I want you to remember about attachment theory and attachment styles, is that it is not, your attachment style is not all of you. It's just a part of you. And it is a part of you that's been working really hard to try and get your needs met. So when you see yourself behaving in ways that you don't really understand, and maybe that you don't really like, to remember that it is just part of you, and that there are other parts that might feel quite different and might have something to say about how that part that's taken over is behaving. And I find in my own system that it can really help me anchor some compassion for myself when my own anxious parts get triggered, when my own wounded parts come up. So the fourth thing I'd love you to talk about is that attachment style exists on a spectrum, which means you can be more or less avoidant, more or less anxious, more or less disorganized in your attachment style. And lots of people will shift their attachment styles depending on who they're in a relationship with. So you might find that in that relationship, you might have like a home base that is anxious. And you might find that, okay, in that relationship, there was a little bit of that anxiety that came up here and here. But in this next relationship, wow, I felt like my anxiety was out of control. I was texting all of the time. I was calling a lot. I was searching their social media all the time. I didn't have a lot of trust in that relationship. And I felt very, very anxious. And that's where I started to do a lot of research about it. That's how it might be feeling for you, right? So most of us will have kind of what I call a home base attachment style, but sometimes you might find that you're more or less of that particular style, depending on the relationship that you're in. The next thing I really want to talk about is that attachment styles can change over time. And I hope that that's a little drop of hope in there for most of you. That in general, they're relatively stable over time, but they're not entirely fixed and change is possible. And this has been proven in the research. And we know that self-healing work and work with a therapist, time in a more secure relationship can have quite a big impact in helping you to move into a more secure style. And I know that it's possible because I've done it myself, and I've walked with a lot of people on that journey, moving from avoidant and from the anxious styles into a more secure style. It's the work that really lights me up and I just love to do. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe, share. It really helps the channel to grow. The show notes for today will be available on my website, psychotherapycentral.health, where you'll also find my free course on breaking relationship cycles. So wherever you are, take care of yourselves. Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you want to learn more about all things love, attachment, and trauma, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at psychotherapy.central or visit my website at psychotherapycentral.health. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review and a 5-star rating. Your support means a lot, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.